I guess I will jump right in. Little background. Uh, I'm the editor of conservativehq.com. I'm a former House and Senate staffer for the Armed Services, Foreign Affairs, uh, National Security Committees. I've worked at the White House as a special assistant to the vice president. And I've actually lived and worked in the Muslim world and traveled through it extensively. So that's kind of where I'm coming from here. Um, the question that this presentation addresses is war with the Islamic Republic of Iran inevitable? And the answer, which we probably none of us really want to hear, is yes, unless we act to change how the Iranian state is constituted and what principles guide it. I think we all know where Iran is. We're not rookies at this business, but Iran is crucial, and it's the most important and politically potent country in what the British used to call the Middle East. The Levant, Syria, Lebanon, etc., was the Near East, and the Far East, of course, is India, China. So uh, Iran is the central and most crucial and most populous country in the Middle East. And I'm not going to run through all these statistics again. It's not a backwater country by any stretch of the imagination, has a large population and a relatively sophisticated military industrial complex, which is actually proving itself in the Russia, um, uh, the current war that Russia and Ukraine are involved in. Okay, now here's a crucial part of this. Who governs the Islamic Republic of Iran? Well, we think of a republic as we have a republic, a constitutional republic. It's not that way in Iran at all. The government of Iran is vested in a theocracy. And while they go through the charade of voting, the candidates are chosen by the theocracy and they have to come basically from the theocracy. Uh, the jurist or those that constitute the theocracy are unelected Islamic religious leaders. And their job is essentially to make sure that uh, the Islamic Revolution and Sharia governance is spread throughout the world. Uh, and finally, to hasten the return of the 12th Imam. Now, this will come up again further in the presentation, but that's important. It's an important concept to remember. Um, the Constitution of Iran posits that there will be a continuing revolution at home and abroad. And this is, very similar to kind of the Trotskyite idea that Marxism would be spread through continuous revolution. Well, Sharia supremacism must be spread through continuous revolution. And this is based in the Quran. It's not something that they made up. Again, their army is an ideological army. Their job is not only guarding the country of Iran, but it is guarding the theocracy and spreading its ideas and its Sharia supremacism throughout the world. This is something that I try not to, read these slides back to you because you'll get them later, but um, this is important and it's worth going through step by step because it's something that a lot of Americans find hard to believe. And certainly it's so far out of our Western ideas of that some people, are just not willing to accept that this is what millions of Iranians think. Um, but the Lord of the Age is the Mahdi. Uh, he is the 12th Shiite Imam. He will rule the world. He is believed to be hiding in a well in near the Jamkaran Mosque in the village on the outskirts of Qom. Qom is the spiritual center of Iran, by the way. It's a very, very important as a center of Shiite learning and of the spread of the Iranian Shiite um, ideology. Now, this sounds crazy or mythical to Westerners, but it's not to Iranians. There are millions of Iranians who believe this, and as evidenced by the fact that Ahmadinejad had a road built, especially for the return of the Mahdi, and that led to the mosque. Now, the crucial difference here is, we have our own millennialist ideas in Judeo-Christian um, biblical teachings, but the crucial difference here is that the Iranians believe that men can act to hasten the return of the Mahdi by creating war and chaos. In other words, we see the return of Christ or the um, uh, redemption of the Jewish people as something that's going to be moved at God's pace inexorably through the course of history. The Iranians in this 12er, if you will, ideology believe that they can advance the return of their Messiah, for lack of a better term, by creating war and chaos. And that's what they're doing, and that's their motivation. So, is war with Iran inevitable? Well, it is because, in matters of war and peace, the enemy always has a vote. And whether we admit it or not, Iran, in its Islamic Republic form, declared war on the United States in 1979. And I think we're all familiar with some of the highlights of that. The Tehran embassy hostage taking, um, various terrorist acts such as the Pan Am 103. Um, there have been many, many instances of Iranians spying here, of conducting terrorist acts within the United States, and of course, through their proxies, regularly attacking us and our allies, both in theater in the Middle East and in Israel and various other places. Germany has also been one of their uh, favorite places to conduct attacks on the West. Their, as I mentioned before, their military-industrial complex is sophisticated. You can put it in the, bottom of the second tier, top of the third tier. They have a very effective ballistic missile program. It's unproven in the sense that they haven't tested any missiles with warheads on them, but there's no doubt that they have the capability to manufacture missiles that are capable of hitting Israel and a large portion of the area where we have interests in the Middle East. Um, well, Iran's nuclear weapons program. And this again is crucial. And I want to read this quote to you. Um, Subsequent to the first Gulf War, General Rodriguez, who was the chief of staff of the Indian Army, said that the lesson of the first Gulf War was do not fight the Americans without nuclear weapons. And George Rasley's corollary to that is you don't seek nuclear weapons unless you plan to fight the United States. And so clearly that's what the Iranian nuclear program is all about. There is some good news. Uh, our enemy is not the Iranian people. Millions of Iranians are restive under the oppressive theocratic regime. Um, but there are at least as many who believe in the Shiite doctrine as enshrined in the Islamic Republic's constitution that they should act to hasten the return of the 12th Imam. And war and chaos are necessary preconditions for the return. Well, it's also important to recognize that they understand us a lot better than we understand them. And I would suggest to you that America is uniquely unsuited to fighting what is in reality a religious war. I mean, we particularly nowadays are, constantly bombarded with the idea that there should be tolerance, that, we should, in the famous words of Rodney King, all get along, when in point of fact, the Iranian theocrats don't want to get along with us. Their goal is to, again, hasten the return of the 12th Imam. The good news is that the regime and its policies are fragile. Um, we say that all politics is local here in America. I would suggest to you, too, that all politics has some basis in economic interests. And the sanctions that Trump imposed were working very well, and they continue to have a serious effect on the Iranian quality of life. And this has led to millions of Iranians being restive under the oppressive regime of the theocrats. Um, Unfortunately, they've never gotten any active support from the United States or the West. Um, just here are some of the chants that recent protests have evidenced. They're not at all favorable to the theocratic concepts and goals of the regime. Rather, they're like everybody else in the sense that they want a good quality of life for themselves and their kids, and they don't have it under this regime. Now, here's the problem. Nobody, well, I won't say nobody, because obviously we're all here, but few people in the government of the United States recognize this. Fewer still have made any suggestion as to how we might improve our situation vis-a-vis the idea that the Iranians have to create war and chaos to advance the return of the Mahdi. And our normal government solution is to, as this slide suggests, holding worthless real estate, killing a few thousand ignorant jihadis, versus fighting the real war, which is the defeat of Sharia supremacism and the Iranian theocratic ideology. And so the alternatives, simplistic. Obama was, we can be friends. Well, of course, the friendship that Obama had in mind and Biden has followed through is we basically let them get away with whatever they want to and return billions of dollars in frozen assets to them to do that. And we all know where that has led, which is they're supplying weapons to Hezbollah and Hamas and um, making mischief throughout the world, and of course, advancing their nuclear and ballistic missile programs. John Bolton's idea we had was that we should have a preemptive strike of at some date and time of our choosing to take out their nuclear and missile programs and to decapitate the regime. Uh, this may actually prove to be necessary at some point in the future, but nobody, without access to classified information can really say at what point the tipping point is. Where are we in the timeline that leads us to December 6th, the day before Pearl Harbor, in this conflict? Michael Ledeen, my good friend, uh, has written a number of books on and articles on Iran, and his answer to that question is, what are the alternatives? Is that we ought to uh, actively advance the domestic opponents of the theocratic regime. And his model for that is how, the Warsaw Pact was taken down by giving active assistance to democratic interests in Poland, Czechoslovakia, etc. A more democratic, non-theocratic Iran might be persuaded to abandon its nuclear program in the same way that, for example, South Africa was persuaded to abandon its nuclear program. Trump's actions in his first term were, I think, on the right track. I have no evidence that he was actually directing the government to support the democratic, non-theocratic Iranian political interests, but his sanctions program was certainly working, and it was definitely feeding and fanning the democratic forces there, because it was having serious consequences for the quality of life for average Iranians. So, how do we get there? Well, regime change versus an all-out shooting war, and I think certainly no rational person is anxious for war of any stripe, particularly one that has the potential to go nuclear or at least dirty. We ought to, first of all, pump up our Farsi language program to encourage the Iranian democratic interests, pump up our social media in the same way. The Iranians are very good with the internet and with computers and with technology generally. And there are millions of Iranians who are receptive to our message through social media, and they take some risks in accessing Western social media to do that. We ought to also be doing things like providing the democratic interests with encrypted cell phones, satellite phones, anything that they can use to communicate securely with each other outside of government channels, because censorship and the monitoring of internal communications in Iran is extreme, and it's modeled really on Red China's and probably given technology and consulting by the Red Chinese, who are Iran's largest trading partner. And finally, we ought to create on-air and online communications channels so that the Iranian dissidents have access to Western media and technology. And this can be delivered not just as propaganda, if you will, but entertainment and information on protest locations. And my suggestion, and I think one that I cribbed from Michael Ledeen, is that we only provide lethal aid if and when these groups prove themselves. So with that, and I hope I didn't burn through that too quickly, Joy, we can open it up for questions and discussion and take it from there.